They'll, so we find, various abilities of cities to involve us in their local activities as well.
So is this not for all residents in the state of California, or is it only some geographic areas?
We started with 4 zip codes. The idea with when you don't have unlimited funding, the decision that we made, that frankly I made, was you don't want to open it up to the entire state and have tens of thousands of people on a waiting list every year. And then we want to put the money in the areas with the highest hazard and highest risk. And risk is hazard, meaning close to a fault, and vulnerability. So we looked for number of pre-1940 houses, high hazard, weighted that 50-50, and that's how we've grown every year. We're now in over 500 zip codes. So we are really good coverage of the coast, which is where 85% of Californians live, in that San Andreas fault zone.
I think our cities and counties can still be helpful.
Absolutely. And we love to work with them as much as we can. We have materials available on our website that they can download, they can order for free, and it'll be delivered to them.
Similar question, which counties are in the pilot program for the multi-family soft story program?
Alameda and San Francisco.
My other question, just having seen what happened to my homeowner's insurance policy as a result of being wildfire zone, flat land, not hills. Is this hazard reduction applicable to the homeowner policy itself, or is it only applicable to the earthquake insurance?
The earthquake insurance. Correct.
Questions from commissioners? So much for being here.
Thank you all for
For
what
the
you
work
do.
you're doing with us in partnership to try to make California seismically safer. I have a guest today from Ridgecrest. Are delighted that you are here with us to give us an update on what has happened in Ridgecrest and the status of the city since the July, I think it was the 4th of July, it might have been the 3rd.
It was the 4th.
It was the 4th, I knew that. And I can remember the ages of my twin granddaughters because that earthquake occurred right after their births.
10:15 a.m. on the 4th and 7:06 p.m. on the 5th.
So Mayor Brune, welcome. Interim Director, do you have anything you would like to?
If you'll grant me one moment so I can close my office door so that way we don't have any interruptions. I'm gonna put
All
my
right,
phone
there's
on
going to be
block.
an introduction. There will be an introduction and then you will go forward.
Awesome, fantastic, because you can see I'm actually at my office right now, and I have a normal day job, so.
Okay, perfect. So commissioners, just as it's been stated, the Ridgecrest earthquake sequence struck Ridgecrest and Torona on July 4th and July 5th in 2019. The earthquake magnitude 6.4 struck on the 4th, the 7.1 on July 5th. The great majority of the nearly $4 billion losses occurred at China Lake Naval Air Weapons Station, the region's largest employer. On July 8th, 2019, the commission deployed a team to view the damage in Ridgecrest and Torona and help staff the California Earthquake Clearinghouse. Working with the Clearinghouse and the city of Ridgecrest to better enable commission field teams to identify areas to view damage and observe teams from the U.S. Geological Survey and the California Geological Survey in the field. Every evening, the field teams reported findings to the Clearinghouse, which helped the commission gain information on the impact of the earthquake sequence had on the region. The Clearinghouse remained open and active for 7 days and did 9 briefings. On September 11, 2019, the commission held a hearing in Ridgecrest City Hall with testimony of approximately 25 individuals who represented many different organizations and the public. During the hearing, commissioners asked presenters questions that focused on their experience during the earthquake and what lessons learned could be passed on to local governments who will ultimately face damaging earthquakes in the future. The commission appointed then Chair Michael Gardner, Vice Chair Mia Maravelli, and Commissioner Jim Hackett as an ad hoc committee to refine lessons learned. Staff, in consultation with the ad hoc committee, compiled findings, recommendations for public policy changes from that hearing, as well as related to initiatives by others, and produced the report, The Ridgecrest Earthquake Sequence of 2019 Lessons Learned. This report is on the commission's website. The commission's emergency response plan calls for efforts to review and assess adequate of federal, state, and local laws, regulations, policies, and practices after an earthquake, and to generate policy recommendations. The commission produced similar reports in the aftermath of past damaging earthquakes, including the 2014 South Napa earthquake, the 2010 El Mayor Gacupa earthquake, and the 2003 San Simeon earthquake. And now I'd like to introduce Eric Byrne, the mayor of Ridgecrest, who will give a quick update on the progress of the city of Ridgecrest and Trona since these events.
Well, first and foremost, thank you to the commission, and my apologies for not making the previous meeting. I got the COVID bug the day before the meeting, so I apologize for not being able to make it. It's my pleasure to be here. I am finishing up my second year as mayor. I was not mayor or in politics at the time of the 2019 earthquake, but I obviously was a citizen of the community and lived through the earthquake. I want to point out a couple just interesting facts. Listening to your meeting from the beginning, when you guys were all talking about the shake alert that occurred on the 4.4 from Santa Rosa, to kind of help put that in perspective for everyone, the Ridgecrest earthquake swarm had more than 34 plus earthquakes within a 30-day time span, including the 6 and the 7s that did it for us. And I wanted to tell you another funny story about what the long-term effects have been on Ridgecrest and its citizens. Is about a week ago, we had this heat wave, and we all got a power conservation message that went off like an Amber Alert last week. I don't know if you guys got it in Northern California as well. We certainly got it in Southern California. I can tell you that the instantaneous response from a citizen of Ridgecrest to one of those going off now is to duck under the desk. Regardless of whether it's an Amber Alert or not, that is an example of what Shake Alert and some of these things have done. And I commend you guys for continuing to work on Shake Alert. But that's an example of how these earthquakes had a psychological effect on the community. But I really don't want to just talk about the impacts of the quakes or how we felt, but I really want to talk to you about the blessing that it has been for the city of Ridgecrest, and try and offer a different approach on how we view earthquakes, as well as what they have done for us economically, which a lot of people may or may not conceptualize. I have stated and continue to state that I believe that the 2 earthquakes that occurred on July 4th and 5th were the greatest blessing our community has received in the last 50 years. And I do believe that in the terms of blessing for a couple of reasons, which is, first and foremost, there was only one loss of life through our 2 major quakes, and the number of the significant number of aftershocks and post shocks. There was, I'm sorry, I just make sure that I can't hear you guys, but I don't think you guys, I think you guys are all muted. So I just want to make sure I don't miss something. I have my chat box up. And the bigger blessing truly was that what happened was that facilities that were well past their age of usefulness, brick buildings, things of that nature that had been built long before California developed codes to help protect our citizenship through earthquakes, were summarily destroyed. And kind of, if you want to look at it, we look at it like the wrecking ball came from the ground, but it actually ignited and excited the need for modernization and for especially making our properties code worthy. To give you a little bit of a personal story, I lived in a mobile home in the 1994 Northridge earthquake, Oak Ridge Mobile Home Park, where there was 90 homes destroyed. My family lived there, and I experienced that live. And so I know what the impact is on mobile homes that are not properly retrofitted. So driving around our community immediately following the earthquake and seeing that the bulk of the damage that we saw on a property and structural basis was mobile homes made us very much aware that there is a blessing behind earthquakes in what it forces us to do to protect our homes and our properties in the future. And we are truly seeing that in Ridgecrest today. Ridgecrest today is on an incredible upswing due to the amount of damage that China Lake Naval Station received, primarily due to that facility being built in the mid 40s and having a certain lack of upgrade during the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. We have seen a surge in construction and opportunity within our community. Economically, we went through COVID with almost zero impact to our local government spending, zero impact to our local government revenues, and zero impact to our local government resources and what we were able to continue to provide citizens. That's a very different story than communities that are incredibly based in tourism or other things, where the loss of hotel revenue, the loss of tourism revenue had significant impacts. A community like Monterey, if I was to speak to somebody from Northern California, where they've seen that, a significant impact. Ridgecrest did not. And the secondary effect that we had a blessing in was that it happened 9 months before COVID. Before we went into a global pandemic, our 80% of our local workforce had already shifted into a remote work environment because of the damage on the base. And for these reasons that I continue to talk about Ridgecrest earthquakes as a blessing. And so it's in my tone, and I hope you guys understand that. What else has happened in terms of Ridgecrest? Ridgecrest has continued to be able to monitor and advise. I think the PTSD aspects of the community have slowly started to wear off. But the fact is that these earthquakes hit in a remote area, that the biggest concern that we took out of it in the months following was what happens if this happens in the major metropolitan. I will tell you that I think the number one concern this community and our local councils, our local agencies, all began to develop, especially our community emergency response team, our CERT team, was if this earthquake had occurred within a 100-mile radius in a different direction, i.e. Bakersfield, Lancaster, Victorville, Rancho Cucamonga, we truly believe that we would have been equally impacted based on its size in terms of our property damage potentially. Because remember, we had mobile home damage and we had a lot of brick damage. That does not sustain if there's not code changes. But we don't think we would have had the same level of response or support because of an urban area hit. And that's something that we've seen a lot of businesses start to take into effect. This includes creating more alternate energy consumption, solar energy. This includes retrofitting of properties. This includes more awareness of the need for disaster action plans. The fact that both earthquakes occurred when we were not in a normal operating day pattern. So July 4th, obviously at 10 a.m., the bulk of businesses were closed and people were at home. And on July 5th, it occurred at 7 p.m., which meant most people had returned home. That is the one area we are equally concerned about, is how does this impact during a normal operating time period, i.e. 2 o'clock in the afternoon, 11 a.m. in the morning? How would it affect our restaurants? And we've spent time looking at that in terms of our emergency response. I have talked, I believe, for about 10 minutes. I would love to hear your questions about Ridgecrest and anything I can answer. I hope that I've provided the commission what they're looking for. I didn't speak in 2019. I lived it. I didn't get to do the political side. So with that, I'm going to be more than happy to answer any questions that you guys would like.
Thank you very much, Mayor Brune. And I'm going to first go to those who are here with me in the room to see if you have any questions.
How many times have you guys ever heard an earthquake called a blessing?
Well, you always have to look for the silver lining in things. That is also saying that we see everything as an opportunity for change and improvement. Any questions from my fellow commissioners that are on Zoom?
I have a question. Thank you so
Cruz.
much, Mayor Brune. I appreciate your focus on, a population that I don't think we typically think about with earthquakes, which is mobile home owners. I know that something that we learned in Sonoma County was also the importance of multilingual emergency information going out to address populations that may not speak English or may not be connected to technology, to alert systems. And so I'm just wondering what Ridgecrest has seen in terms of, outreach to communities that typically are not connected to some of these alert systems or this information, and whether or not that has increased and what's worked.
I would say I'm going to say it's probably not as much a massive change, and that's probably because we are a smaller rural community. So we have a strong mixed demographic, and it certainly has become more and more in the Latino sectors. We have added a bunch of resources within our NICSI resource, which is our community response text message and alert system that allows people to make the choice between languages that they would receive the text in. We've also tried to make sure that all of our emergency response vans and our CERT teams have bilingual staff on them, including obviously our police departments, fire departments of those types of natures. Diversity within those areas, just make sure that we're always able to respond to the concerns. Truthfully, we found a lot of our mobile homeowners were seniors more than anything else. These were properties purchased in the 70s and minimally retrofitted, minimally upgraded over 30, 40 years. And as we all know, an earthquake, especially if it's a not a deep earthquake, but a shallow earthquake, the amount of force that's placed on those jacks at the initial point of impact is substantially larger. And that's what we saw, especially on the 6th floor, because the 6th floor was closer to the city center, where the 7-1 was a little bit further out towards the naval base. So we've worked to provide those resources. Have we seen a dramatic change? No, but we also haven't went through another one yet. So, be prepared for the worst and hope for the best.
Thank you.
Other questions from commissioners?
Well, it looks like my job is done.
Thank you so much for being here with us today and the work that you're doing. And we look forward to hearing more about the blessings of having an earthquake.
And I keep your eye on Ridgecrest over the next couple of years. Hopefully we'll prove that theory very strongly. And thank you again to Cal OES for the invitation and the opportunity, and for your support during the 2019 earthquakes. Those were a very difficult period for our community, especially in the trauma. So the mental trauma. Thank you very much.
Brune. Item on our agenda is an update on Outsmart disaster, and I will turn to our interim executive director.
So Outsmart disaster is, I'm going to give a little background about this campaign and how it connects to the commission. There's some deep history here that some of the new commissioners you may not be aware of. So I'd just like to bring you up to speed a little bit on this campaign before I introduce our speaker. The Outsmart Disaster Campaign is a statewide campaign housed within the California Office of Small Business Advocate. The campaign is designed to communicate risk, provide resources, and call to action business and organizations across California with the goal of collectively becoming more prepared to reduce damages and speed up business recovery in the wake of the disaster. In 2017 and 2018, the commission provided the initial funding for this campaign in the amount of $100,000. The campaign was centered around the Haywired scenario. The commission hired the Honey Agency, which is a branding firm, to develop a consumer-friendly platform and campaign to inform targeted audience on proactive earthquake preparedness, loss mitigation, and how to recover rapidly from earthquakes. Building awareness about the Haywired scenario and the findings that are published in the various reports, the Honey Agency created a recognizable and unique brand for the scenario. The deliverables included creating a toolkit of materials, a website, brochures, flyers, social media graphics, media press kit, and badges for project's partners and participating businesses. This was phase 1 of the project campaign. Phase 2 was the statewide public engagement campaign and the development of the Resilient Business Challenge, which was a call to action. After the Honey Agency completed its contractual scope of work of the campaign, was then handed over to the California Academy for Economic Development. A little background, I was the project manager on the inception of the Outsmart Disaster Campaign. I went through all of the RFP process through this, so this campaign is near and dear to my heart. It was a lot of hours, it was a lot of work. But again, the commission during those years were the initial funding. And at that time, we were housed in with Business Consumer Services Housing Agency. So with that being said, if commissioners have any follow-up questions on the history, I will answer some questions. But now I would like to introduce Gurbax Sahota, the President and Chief Executive Office with the California Association for Local Economic Development, who will provide us an update on the campaign. There's been a lot of great work done in this space, and so I'm really excited to hear an update on where the commission, where the campaign is now.
Great, thank you so much for the introduction and the opportunity to update you. I hope that by the time I'm done, you'll see that your $100,000 investment has made a difference. It's certainly grown in terms of the amount of funding we've raised for the campaign and the outreach we're doing. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about us, how we're connected to the campaign currently, what it looks like, some of the metrics we're using, how we're looking at success, and making sure that the businesses themselves are taking the actions, and then also opportunities for the future. So first, just a little bit about us. If you're not familiar with CALED, we are the California Association for Local Economic Development. Trying to move this, but it's not going. It could be me, operator error. Okay. There we go. All right. So we are one of the largest economic development associations in the country, certainly the largest in California. We have over 800 members. The majority of them are cities and counties. That does include Walnut Creek, Sonoma, Los Angeles, Rio Dell. Commissioner Garnes, great to see you on here as well. But big cities, big counties, small cities, we cover the entirety of the state. So our focus is how do we support local economic development? And obviously, when we start looking at the economic disruptions, not just of earthquakes, but the other events that we've seen across the state, there's certainly a need to provide support so that we can have sustainable economies and make sure that economic opportunities are available to our residents. So that's our interest. There's a couple of things that I brought with you today to give you a sense of why we're connected to Outsmart Disaster in particular. Several years ago, the federal USDA Rural Development Department asked us to put together a California infrastructure financing guidebook. What we're seeing in rural communities is that they weren't prepared, not just for disaster, but to have a methodology for reviewing their projects, whether they were infrastructure-based projects or economic development projects like commercial uses or industrial. So the reason I brought this book for you is the last chapter in particular is about disaster resiliency and disaster infrastructure, and was written by practitioners from Sonoma County and Santa Rosa after the Tubbs fire. And it shares a lot of what they wish cities and counties would know in terms of preparation as they go into a disaster event. Additionally, the U.S. Economic Development Administration reached out to us immediately following the COVID shutdowns or in the middle of the COVID shutdowns and asked if we could prepare a guide for local governments to help them with economic disruptions. So planning for resiliency, planning for recovery, talking about response and the role of local government in particular. And again, our focus is local government from the perspective that while it might take the state and the Fed some time to organize and get into the community, cities and counties don't have that window of opportunity. They have to react quickly. So what information and tools can we get our members so they can start planning for economic disruptions? So our focus is business. Although we talk about the economy, it really is that how do we help those individual business owners, understanding that oftentimes mid-size and larger businesses can pivot in scenarios like COVID shutdowns, but the smaller businesses can't. So you'll hear that theme as we talk about Outsmart as well. All right, so a little bit about the partners, because the names are similar, so you're probably wondering why the Academy is mentioned as the partner for for Outsmart Disaster. So CALID is the state association is a C6. And so while it is our mission to support Outsmart Disaster, we had the same challenge the state did, which was we're not a C3. So we have a foundation, the California Academy for Economic Development. The Academy originally had the agreement with the Business Consumer Service Housing Agency to implement this program and to accept funds on behalf of the program. And then currently, I think just within the last few months now, we just signed an MOU to move our partnership from the Business Consumer Service Agency over to the Office of the Small Business Advocate, where it's currently housed. One of the important things to us when we started down this path with Outsmart, again, we were in a situation where the feds had come to us and said, look, this was immediately following the Tubbs fire. Can you create a tool to help businesses or to help communities, cities and counties in particular, prepare their businesses for these types of disasters or economic disruptions? And while as an association, we certainly had an interest in this work, we didn't have the expertise. So when Outsmart was looking for, the Business Consumer Service Housing Agency was looking for a statewide partner, at the same time, we'd been asked to do this work and we had declined to do this work until we realized that you guys had already invested in it and put some great tools together that maybe we could amplify and refine based on the experience of our members. So a partnership was born and we're really grateful that you made the investment. Does that sound mean I've already talked way too long? Oh, okay. All right, stop me. I can keep talking. I'm very good at that. Okay. So yes, let me move on to the next slide because now I'm worried about time. The campaign, as Selena mentioned, is exactly how she described it, an awareness campaign. And we've gone through an iterative process. That's okay, that's a good one. So we've gone through an iterative process. Originally, our metric for success was how many businesses can we have go through the Resilient Business Challenge? And you'll see the challenge itself. See if it'll take us to the next slide. There we go. It has 5 steps, so it's got core curriculum. Now, what happened during the pandemic, you'll see in the slide deck I sent you in the first slide, I repurposed our original Outsmart Disaster presentation, which was dated March 10th, 2020, not realizing it, but it's nice to share, I guess. That was our only in-person meeting under our watch of Outsmart Disaster, because immediately following that first meeting is when the shutdown started. Our original intent with the campaign, because we had the outreach at the local level, was to work through cities and counties and local nonprofits that help businesses and say, bring your businesses in, let's actually walk them through the challenge. Let's have them develop the material they need, respond to the questions so they have a resiliency plan. What we found, though, obviously, is that as the shutdowns began, people were not necessarily interested, one, in meeting in person, and two, the top issue of the day wasn't planning for resiliency. It was how do we stay alive, especially those small businesses. So we found ourselves pivoting quite a bit. The challenge as it exists today, the 5 core components, are really based now, not just off the work that you all had done, but they have enhancements from federal resources such as FEMA as well as Cal OES. So as you're going through each part of the challenge and it says, have you looked at your supply chain? It'll have resources that help you map out your supply chain, but not originally created by us, because as you remember, I had mentioned to you, that's not our area of expertise, but deferring to the folks that we know do this work. So really excited about that. But part of that, we also realize it's really difficult, especially during a time, again, referencing the shutdowns, to get people to take the time to do the challenge. So what were other ways that we could get folks to engage with the content so they're thinking about resiliency, even at a time that they might be dealing with recovery or even response? So we changed the metrics as we've been working with the program. One of the things that we talk about is, how much engagement, how many leads are we getting off of social media? How many people are downloading a toolkit? So we abbreviated some of the information you'll find in the actual complete challenge into a toolkit that they could download. So tracking those metrics as well. More recently, we did an email education campaign, and it was it was coursework. So you'd get an email on the first category, and it would ask you 2 or 3 pertinent questions, like, have you done this planning? If not, would you like to learn more? If not, here's a link also that you can just do the planning. Here's the document. So we did a 5-course email. It was pretty successful. We're waiting for the statistics on that. Again, we think it's successful because we like the way it looks and we think it's important, but really the measure is how many people are engaging with it. And we're waiting for that last set of metrics to come in. What I thought would be interesting for you all to see is we've also been testing the messaging over the last 2 years to see what works. Thank you, Tanya. I think you're moving it. The buzz is moving it. Yay, there it is. All right. This messaging, this was our top hit in terms of response and people's engagement. And we've been really careful not to do fear-based messaging, but just are you aware of this? Have you thought about this? And so fear of an earthquake or being prepared for an earthquake was the #1 social media engagement post that we had and have had over the campaign. So this was recent. It was over the summer. I want to share that with you. So you had that just in your thoughts as well, in terms of how relevant your work is and the messaging that you send out. And the final thing I would share, there we go. I want to give you a sense of what's happened with the money. Again, your $100,000 investment has been leveraged over and over again. We received multiple grants from Edison International in particular to work in their area, in their service territory, primarily with nonprofits and businesses. So what was interesting about this portion of the campaign, originally we did not incorporate nonprofits, but what we saw during the COVID shutdowns is that nonprofits were impacted and didn't have the access necessarily to resources that businesses did. However, a lot of nonprofits had to ramp up their response and support businesses. So what we also were thinking about, if you've worked for a nonprofit or managed a nonprofit, you know that you have to be set up in a sustainable fashion before you can talk about resiliency and putting other plans in place or plans for expansion in terms of if there is an economic disruption or you have to expand your services. So we added a nonprofit sustainability component to the tool, which Edison International paid for, which is great. It's live now, or making tweaks to it. JP Morgan Chase, one of the exciting things about the JP Morgan Chase, it's exciting for us, maybe not for them. They gave us $500,000 2 months prior to the shutdowns. So what it allowed us to do is really pivot and continually test our message and figure out how do we get businesses to pay attention and interact. And you'll see some of the work that we did there. The biggest part of the JP Morgan Chase funding for us, aside from keeping the campaign alive during such a difficult time where we're vying for the attention of small businesses, it gave us match to a much larger federal grant. And that's the $780,000 that we got from the Economic Development Administration to further the campaign, to further the outreach. Currently, the way that funding is, the way we are using that funding is going to be to support OSBA's outreach and getting back into the plan of how do we meet people where they are. Because while it's great for us to do webinars, send out social media posts, at the end of the day, we need to be in the communities. And we think the remainder of the funding will be used for that. For us as an association, what happens now, since we have this transition plan in place where OSBA will be doing more of the work, we'll turn into a fiscal agent of the grant and we'll be less in the weeds of the work, but certainly since it's of interest to us, promoting it to the cities and counties and the business technical assistance organizations we know and sharing it within our network. But we couldn't ask for a better outcome to take on a state tool that you all developed. Thank you very much. Gave us the opportunity to hopefully add value to and keep it alive and make it better and turn it back to the state in a way that not only is it sustainable, hopefully it's impactful, and the lessons we've learned will help the state get closer to businesses, especially the most vulnerable. And that's where we are. So thank you.
Thank you very much. So questions, we're going to start here in the room. And questions from the Zoom wall. Our commissioners who are remote. I can't. Garnes.
Thank you. Thank you for that presentation. That was it was very exciting, a very exciting presentation. It's one of the things I'm really most enthusiastic about, resiliency and this program and what it'll do for businesses, small and medium sized, is fantastic. The opportunity it gives them to address these issues before a disaster happens is really just amazing. And I'm so happy that this exists. And I'm hoping that we can figure out a way to um, stretch this out to residents as well, residential properties, because resiliency is the thing, and being prepared is the thing that will make any disaster go so much better, and perhaps that blessing thing that the mayor of Ridgecrest was speaking of, we would experience that. So just thank you so much for the presentation. I'm very excited about it. I am sure that as a commission, we're all probably excited about the where you are in this campaign, and I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Commissioner Lopez.
Thank you for the presentation. That was really great, and congratulations to the success. I was wondering if you have the data to be able to show throughout California where you're getting the engagement, just to see, is it spread as we would like to see, or is it maybe concentrated in a different area? Do you have that information?
We do, and I can share those maps with Selena to share with you, especially on the more recent tracking that we've been doing over the last 6 months. I'll tell you from the last report that we got from our partner, it seemed like a lot of the engagement was in the lower Central Valley and the Los Angeles area, and some further down. Not as much as we'd like to see in the Sierras and some of the more rural communities traveling north as well. But that's why we need to make the concerted effort to get into those communities and work with the partners on the ground. But I'll share those maps with you so you have them.
Great, thank you.
Can I build on that question if you don't? And then Commissioner De La Cruz, I'll go to you. Of course, earthquake risk is higher in certain areas and lower in others. Are you correlating the data on your traction and interest against the hazard zones, the propensity for hazards?
So I'll tell you, I am not a hazard expert.
Oh, there's
However,
some maps that we have.
Yeah, so we do have, and what we can do is we've overlaid the post that went out with where it resonated. So that's something we can share with you, because it didn't surprise any of us, I think, that the earthquake post really resonated around the Los Angeles, kind of north of Los Angeles, north of the Grapevine area. So we can share that with you, but I don't know if the correlation is going to be as tight, because I think the only two hazards that we've done specific posts to, one would be the earthquakes and two would be wildfires. So we can share that with you, but as we do more of that outreach, we can certainly test for it and share that message with OSBA so they can do the same.
It also may help you target geographically where your message needs to be. Commissioner De La Cruz.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this exciting presentation. I had similar questions to Commissioner Lopez around, what worked, which partners on the ground were able to get the message out. Did you see kind of certain community-based organizations or certain structures within communities where this was really their center? And then I would just also love to know if you collected data that was disaggregated by race and ethnicity of the business owners, because I know that when you overlay, access to whether it was the PPP loans or other recovery mechanisms, that really left out a lot of folks from being able to know how to apply and receive some of these benefits. So I was just curious about that combination of also helping people to navigate the recovery funding opportunities.
Great questions. I'll share with you one thing we found. It was very difficult to do outreach through nonprofits in particular. And I don't know if that was, just the issue of what was happening in the environment with those technical assistance providers working with small businesses, or if there's some other issue there. Also, I have a bias because our partners are local government. So when we didn't see the traction happening with the nonprofits, we started reaching out to our network. Sonoma in particular has been awesome in that the county has helped us And I think we're looking at even now doing another one, do a handful in Spanish in particular to reach Hispanic business owners. So we don't have the data by race. And I think part of it is that that's just not a metric we've been tracking, but it's certainly something for consideration that we can share with OSBA as feedback from the commission. I do think OSBA's plan moving forward is going to be start looking at those technical assistance providers that are nonprofits, because those are the ones that they fund through that TAP program, the technical assistance program. For us, our outreach will almost always be through local governments or economic development corporations, just because that's our network. And that is one benefit of it, the program being going back to the state, that broader reach to hopefully engage more nonprofits in the work.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm in Sonoma, and there is nothing quite like having lived through a number of disasters to know how important disaster preparedness is. So I'm glad we're in the mix, and we're happy to share. Thank you for your work.
Thank you. I'll share something with your team about your team in Sonoma and Santa Rosa. When they wrote the piece in the infrastructure financing guidebook on disaster preparedness from an infrastructure perspective, they talked about the psychological impact to the team, to the city and county staff. And that was a component that we don't normally talk about when we're talking about preparedness, resiliency, response, or recovery. It was very useful to a lot of communities that we shared it with. So great insights from your team. Thank you.
So adding on to Commissioner De La Cruz's question, are you working through local chambers of commerce, or they have good access to the business, obviously to the business community?
So the original outreach of the campaign prior to us even getting here actually funded, I think, a couple of chambers, Sacramento one in particular, and then one in Southern California, as well as another nonprofit in Southern California. We just didn't see the traction that we were hoping for. That could also be a function of the metric of success being completing the challenge, and getting a small business owner to take that much time to go through the challenge the way it looked at that point in time may have been the barrier. So certainly I expect that you'll see with OSBA the outreach to the chambers.
Any other questions from? Thank you for being with us today and for picking up where we left off. Because and it is really good to hear that you are adapting the program to how the market is responding or not responding to the outreach. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. And Selena, thank you for reaching out.
Take a 30-second break and discuss the agenda. With the commission's agreement, I am going to adjust the order of the agenda so that we will take items 8, which is miscellaneous announcements, and item 9, public comment, before we move into closed session. We will abide by the law and also come back after closed session, but those who are not here and interested in what we may or may not report during closed session will then not be waiting around to make a comment to us. Is anyone not agreeable to that? Seeing none, we will now have miscellaneous announcements. Interim Executive
Yes. Okay. First of all, thank you, commissioners, for hanging in here for our today's commission meeting. Again, a lot of the presentations that were presented today, when I first came to the commission 7 years ago, I was part of all of those. Ridgecrest was my first earthquake. I was deployed there. I went down with the team. It was scary, crazy. It was just an experience that I will never, ever forget. And then obviously the Outsmart disaster campaign, that campaign from the inception, literally it was designed and created with SEC staff along with business consumer services agency staff. And we just kind of created this campaign and had no idea what it was going to look like. So today was one of those took me back down memory lane. So thank you for letting us bring you up to speed on those two topics. Just real quick, I just want to touch base. As commissioners know, the commission is funded through the insurance fund. It's its primary funding source, and it's derived from the annual assessments on insured commercial and residential property exposure from the previous year. Since fiscal year 2014-15, the assessment has been at 15 cents. The California Department of Insurance is the entity that sets the assessment. Every year, the Department of Insurance will go through a review of our assessment to make sure that we are fiscally solvent, that assessment is meeting all of our budgetary needs. And annually, the assessments collect about 1.5 million. In this past year, the review of the assessment was done by CDI, and it was suggested and made that we decrease our assessment from 15 cents to 13 cents. Now, by doing this, it'll allow us to ensure physical solvency, but it'll also make sure that our account is embarked on let me back up. We can only have 10% reserve of our assessment, and we are over that 10%. And a lot of that was just because obviously the pandemic, we had vacancies. So we are above the 10% reserve, which our insurance account can be. So for this fiscal year, 2022-2023, we are going to lower it to 13 cents. This has no negative programming impact to the commission. We are in good fiscal health. And every year, the CDI will go ahead and do the assessment. So for the next fiscal year, if they look at our trend, we need to bring it back up to 15 cents or maybe 14 cents, they'll make that adjustment then. So I just wanted to kind of let you know that the assessment rate for this fiscal year will be 13 cents. Again, nothing to panic about. We are in great fiscal health. We have a great reserve. We have savings. And so if there's any questions or concerns, I'm here to answer any, but just wanted to bring that to your attention.
Questions from commissioners? Up to date. It is disconcerting to think that when our homeowners' policies are as high as they are, that somebody thinks that 2 cents is going to make some political difference. I'll open the meeting for public comment. This is an opportunity for members of the public to speak to us on items of interest that are not on our agenda or are on our agenda in this case. One wish to speak to us under public comment. Hands raised, so I will close public comment and we will now go to our last item on the agenda. The open session has concluded. Going into closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 11126A1. During this time, the open session on the Zoom feed will be public. Those individuals on the Zoom feed who are going into closed session will be moved into a breakout room for closed session. Those who are here in our room in Sacramento who are not eligible to be here during closed session will need to leave. Happening now. Upon conclusion of the closed session, commissioners and all other attendees will return to open session for any final public comment. At this time, we will move commissioners on Zoom into the closed session breakout room. now returned from closed session, and we have we have nothing to report publicly. I think I've said it correctly. Per council, let me know if you have anything else you'd like me to say at this point.
I think you can confirm that further action will be provided, or further action will be announced subsequent to the matter that was identified on the agenda with respect to consideration of the appointment of an executive director.
Please let the record note that legal counsel made that announcement. I'm not going to repeat it.
Sure.
Thank you very much. And that concludes our September 15th, 2022 Seismic Safety Commission meeting. Our next meeting is Thursday, November 10th, and hopefully more of us will be in the room, so the Zoom screen will be a little shallower. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.